Welcome back, adventurers. Tonight, we delve into an enchanting realm hidden just beneath the surface of our own, a world of wonder, danger, and endless possibility, where owls deliver your mail, where broomsticks soar through the air, and where magic is not just a myth, but a way of life. So, settle in, get comfortable, and let the soothing story carry you away to the land of dreams. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, telling us what you thought of the story. Sweet dreams. The ancient stones of Hogwarts Castle exhaled a soft, earthy scent, a fragrance steeped in centuries of magic and whispered secrets. Sunlight, a pale, hesitant gold, filtered through the towering stained glass windows of the great hall, painting the long wooden tables with a mosaic of vibrant hues. Each mote of dust danced in the radiant beams, a tiny, shimmering constellation within the vast, echoing space. A gentle hum of anticipation vibrated through the hall, a symphony of rustling robes, hushed whispers, and the delicate clinking of silverware. New students, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation, sat rigidly on the benches, their hands clasped tightly in their laps. Their new school robes, crisp and unblemished, felt stiff and unfamiliar against their skin. The older students, in contrast, slouched comfortably, their postures relaxed, their movements fluid and confident. They exchanged familiar greetings, their voices a low, melodic murmur that blended seamlessly with the ambient sounds of the castle. The air thrummed with a low, constant magical energy, barely perceptible, like the deep, resonant hum of a beehive. It was the heartbeat of Hogwarts, a tangible presence that permeated every nook and cranny of the ancient structure. Among the new arrivals, a young boy named Arthur sat slightly apart. His dark hair, still bearing the imprint of a Muggle haircut, fell across his forehead, a stark contrast to the neatly styled, often magically enhanced, coiffures of his peers. His fingers, more accustomed to holding a smartphone than a wand, fidgeted nervously with the edge of his robe. He ran his thumb across the smooth, polished wood of his new wand, tracing the delicate vine-like carvings that spiraled along its length. The wood felt strangely warm beneath his touch, radiating a faint, almost imperceptible energy. Arthur observed his surroundings with a keen, analytical gaze. He noticed the subtle variations in the ambient magical energy, the way it pulsed and flowed, like the gentle ebb and flow of the tide. He felt the subtle shifts in temperature, the slight variations in the scent of the air, the almost imperceptible differences in the texture of the stone beneath his feet. These were nuances that most of his classmates, accustomed to a world saturated with magic, seemed to overlook. To them, it was as normal as breathing. The headmaster, a tall, imposing figure with a long silver beard that flowed down his chest like a silken waterfall, rose from his seat at the head table. A hush fell over the hall, as swift and silent as the descent of a curtain. He began the traditional welcome speech, his voice deep and resonant, filled with a warmth that belied his austere appearance. He spoke of the history of Hogwarts, of the four houses and their respective virtues, of the importance of knowledge, courage, and loyalty. His words painted a vivid picture of a vibrant, magical community, a place where young witches and wizards could learn and grow, honing their skills and discovering their potential. As the speech continued, Arthur's attention drifted. He was captivated by the subtle intricacies of the magic that permeated the castle. He noticed the way the light seemed to bend and shimmer around certain objects, the faint, almost inaudible hum that emanated from the ancient walls, the way the shadows seemed to deepen and swirl in the corners of the room. These subtle, almost imperceptible details whispered of a deeper, more ancient magic, a magic that lay dormant, hidden beneath the surface of the everyday routines and rituals of Hogwarts life. It was a magic that called to him, a silent siren song that resonated deep within his soul. He felt a deep longing to understand it, to unravel its mysteries, to explore its depths. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was where he was meant to be. This was a place where he could finally begin to understand the strange, inexplicable things that had always set him apart, the things that had made him an outsider in the Muggle world. This was his chance to finally belong, to finally find a place where he could be himself, a place where he could embrace the magic that flowed through his veins. This was his home, but this year, this home would not be as safe and welcoming as it had been in years past. The initial disturbances were subtle, easily dismissed as the quirks of a castle steeped in ancient magic. A faint, metallic tang would momentarily lace the air in the potions classroom, sharp and acrid against the usual herbal aromas, causing a few students to wrinkle their noses. It was so fleeting, most did not even register it. In the library, books occasionally rustled on their shelves, their pages turning as if stirred by an unseen breeze, the soft whisper of parchment barely audible above the quiet scratching of quills. Some students, hunched over their studies, might glance up, their eyes scanning the towering shelves, a flicker of unease crossing their faces before they returned to their work. Sometimes, in the dead of night, a low, resonant hum, like the distant drone of 1,000 bees, would reverberate through the stone corridors, a sound that seemed to vibrate deep within one's bones, leaving a lingering sense of disquiet in its wake. Arthur, however, noticed these anomalies. His senses, honed by a lifetime of navigating the subtle currents of a world devoid of overt magic, were acutely attuned to the subtle shifts and fluctuations in the castle's energy. He felt the subtle changes in the air pressure, the minute variations in temperature, the almost imperceptible vibrations in the stone floors. He began to observe patterns, subtle but persistent deviations from the established norms of Hogwarts' magical atmosphere. During Transfiguration class, the usual crisp, crackling energy that accompanied successful spells seemed to fray around the edges, dissipating more quickly than it should, the air left with a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer. The feeling of magic felt wrong, like a note played slightly off-key. He noted that the magical readings he took during his independent studies in the library fluctuated erratically. The delicate instruments he used, designed to measure ambient magical energy, behaving in ways that defied logical explanation. The needles would quiver and jump, the readings spiking and plummeting without any apparent cause. The subtle distortions were most pronounced in certain areas of the castle, a particular corner of the library, a stretch of corridor near the astronomy tower, a seemingly unremarkable classroom on the 3rd floor. In these places, the air felt heavy, almost oppressive, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum seemed to linger in the background. He felt it in his teeth, an odd sensation. These sensory distortions were accompanied by a growing sense of unease, a subtle but pervasive feeling of being watched, of being out of sync with the natural rhythm of the castle. It was like walking through a familiar room in the dark, only to find that the furniture had been rearranged, the familiar landmarks shifted just slightly out of place. Arthur found himself constantly on edge, his senses on high alert, his mind racing to make sense of the strange phenomena he was experiencing. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was just the stress of being in a new environment, the pressure of keeping up with his studies, the lingering effects of his Muggle upbringing, a world where such things were simply not possible. But deep down, he knew it was something more. He felt it in his bones, a primal instinct that something was deeply wrong, that the very fabric of Hogwarts was being subtly, insidiously altered. The feeling was akin to the hush that falls over the forest before a storm, a sense of impending change, of a gathering darkness that was slowly, inexorably creeping into the heart of the castle. It was subtle at first, but Arthur felt it growing stronger each day. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. This growing darkness was not something to be taken lightly. The subtle anomalies that had initially been dismissed as mere quirks of an old magical castle began to escalate, their frequency and intensity growing with each passing day. The whispers started subtly, like the rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze, a quiet murmur circulating among the students. A first-year Gryffindor swore that their reflection in a bathroom mirror had winked at them, the image distorted for a fleeting moment, a mischievous glint in its eye that was definitely not their own. A group of Hufflepuffs reported a chilling draft in the usually warm and cozy common room, a cold spot that seemed to move around, defying any logical explanation. It clung to them like a shroud, making their teeth chatter. The air in that spot carried a faint, metallic scent, like old blood. The incidents became increasingly bizarre and unsettling. In the herbology greenhouses, plants withered and bloomed out of season, their vibrant colors fading to a sickly gray, their leaves curling and twisting into unnatural shapes. The gentle, earthy fragrance of the greenhouses was replaced by a cloying, almost nauseating sweetness, like overripe fruit on the verge of decay. The magical creatures housed in the care of Magical Creatures Paddock grew restless and agitated. The usually docile hippogriffs paced their enclosures, their sharp eyes darting nervously, their feathers ruffled and disheveled. The playful bowtruckles, normally content to nestle in the branches of their favorite trees, chattered anxiously, their tiny bodies trembling. The sounds of their distress, a chorus of anxious chirps and distressed whinnies, echoed across the grounds, adding to the growing sense of unease. Fear, a subtle but insidious presence, began to permeate the castle walls, seeping into the very stones like a damp chill. Whispers turned to worried conversations, held in hushed tones in the corners of classrooms and the dimly lit corridors. Students huddled together, casting anxious glances over their shoulders, their laughter becoming strained and infrequent. The once bright and vibrant atmosphere of Hogwarts grew muted and subdued, the playful banter replaced by a tense silence. The portraits lining the walls, usually a source of amusement and occasional gossip, seemed to watch the students with a newfound intensity, their painted eyes following their every move, their expressions unreadable. The professors, initially dismissive of the students' concerns, began to take notice. Standard magical countermeasures, spells designed to dispel illusions, cleanse areas of negative energy, and restore balance, proved strangely ineffective. Charms that had worked flawlessly for centuries seemed to fizzle and fade, their energy dissipating into the air like smoke. The intricate protective wards woven into the very fabric of Hogwarts, designed to shield the castle from harm, felt strained, their energy thinned and weakened, like an overstretched tapestry on the verge of tearing. It was clear that whatever was happening was not natural. Some of the older, more experienced professors, their faces etched with worry, began to suggest consulting the Ministry of Magic. However, The wheels of bureaucracy turned slowly, hampered by skepticism and a reluctance to acknowledge the severity of the situation. Ministry officials, far removed from the unsettling reality within the castle walls, dismissed the reports as exaggerated, the product of overactive imaginations and youthful hysteria. They insisted on following protocol, on conducting thorough investigations, on adhering to established procedures, all while the disturbances within Hogwarts continued to escalate, the sense of dread growing stronger with each passing day. The students were growing restless, and the professors were at a loss. Something needed to be done. Arthur, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a growing sense of urgency, felt compelled to delve deeper into the mystery. His unique perspective, a blend of Muggle pragmatism and a burgeoning understanding of the magical world, led him to suspect a connection to a forgotten, perhaps even forbidden, type of magic. He began to spend hours in the Hogwarts library, not just in the main sections, but venturing into the restricted areas, his fingers tracing the spines of ancient, leather-bound tomes, their pages brittle and yellowed with age. The air in these sections was thick with dust and the scent of decaying parchment, a musty aroma that spoke of centuries of accumulated knowledge, some of it intentionally hidden, locked away from prying eyes. The silence here was profound, broken only by the occasional creak of a settling shelf or the soft rustle of his own movements. It was so quiet, he could almost hear the whisper of forgotten spells embedded in the very pages. He meticulously collected clues, subtle anomalies that others might overlook. He charted the fluctuations in ambient magic, using his wand as a divining rod, noting the areas where the energy felt particularly distorted or unstable. He cross-referenced these findings with the castle's history, poring over ancient texts, searching for any mention of similar occurrences, any hint of a forgotten magical practice that might explain the strange phenomena. He observed the unsettling behavior of the magical creatures, noting their heightened agitation, their unusual vocalizations, their aversion to certain areas of the castle grounds. The creatures, more attuned to the subtle currents of magic than most humans, were clearly reacting to something unseen, something that disrupted the natural order of their world. He noticed in particular how the Thestrals, usually invisible to those who had not witnessed death, seemed to be visible to more and more students as the days went on. Whatever this energy was, it fed off of death, loss, and sadness. Arthur began to share his theories, tentatively at first, with a few trusted classmates. He spoke of a type of magic that manipulated sensory perceptions, that created illusions so real they could affect the physical world, a magic that thrived on fear and uncertainty. He explained his hypothesis that the disturbances were not random, but were connected, linked by a common thread, a subtle but persistent energy signature that he had detected in his readings. He was careful who he spoke to, aware that his ideas were unconventional, even radical, and that he risked ridicule or worse. However, his insights were largely dismissed. Some listened politely, then gently suggested that he was letting his imagination run away with him, that he was reading too much into things, that he simply didn't understand the complexities of established magical principles. Others reacted with suspicion, their eyes narrowing as they questioned his motives, his methods, his very presence at Hogwarts. They saw his Muggle upbringing not as a unique perspective, but as a deficiency, a sign that he was an outsider, someone who didn't belong, who couldn't possibly understand the intricacies of their world. They whispered that he was dabbling in dark magic, that he was the cause of the disturbances, not the one trying to solve them. He was different, and that made him dangerous in their eyes. The fear within the castle escalated, fueled by rumors and misinformation. The student body, fractured and anxious, began to turn on itself. Accusations flew, fueled by suspicion and a desperate need to find a scapegoat. Some whispered that a dark wizard had infiltrated the castle, while others believed that a malevolent entity had been awakened, disturbed from its centuries-long slumber. The once unified student body fractured into factions, each with its own theory, its own suspicions, its own fears. The sense of community, of shared purpose that had once defined Hogwarts was rapidly eroding, replaced by an atmosphere of paranoia and distrust. It seemed that whatever dark force was at work within the castle walls, it was succeeding in tearing the school apart from the inside. Arthur, trying to help, found himself increasingly isolated, a lone voice in a growing storm of fear and accusation. His differences, once a source of interest, now became a liability, making him the focus of growing distrust. The escalating tension and fear within Hogwarts reached a fever pitch, culminating in a terrifying incident that shattered any remaining doubts about the severity of the threat. A young Ravenclaw student, a bright and inquisitive girl named Elara, known for her love of ancient runes and her meticulous attention to detail, was directly affected by the disturbances. She had been studying late in the library, engrossed in a particularly challenging text on advanced runic magic, a subject that had always fascinated her. The library, usually a sanctuary of quiet study, felt different that night. The air was thick and heavy, charged with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the frantic scratching of her quill and the occasional unsettling creak of the bookshelves. As she traced the intricate symbols on the page, the runes seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, their familiar shapes twisting into grotesque and unfamiliar forms. The air grew colder, a biting chill that seeped into her bones, making her teeth chatter despite the warmth of her heavy robes. A low, guttural growl echoed through the silent stacks, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, vibrating deep within her chest. Suddenly, the library around her dissolved, the towering bookshelves melting away like wax, replaced by a nightmarish landscape that seemed ripped from the darkest corners of her imagination. She was no longer safe within the familiar walls of Hogwarts. Twisted, gnarled trees clawed at a swirling, inky sky, their branches adorned with glowing, malevolent eyes that followed her every move. The ground beneath her feet was a shifting morass of shadows, writhing with unseen creatures that snatched at her ankles, their touch icy and sickening. A chorus of whispers, disembodied voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filled her ears, murmuring insidious threats and terrifying prophecies. The whispers were filled with such malice, such hate. They clawed at her mind. Elara, paralyzed by fear, could only watch as the horrific scene unfolded around her, her mind reeling, her senses overwhelmed. It felt so real, so tangible, that she couldn't distinguish it from reality. The experience was so intense, so profoundly disturbing, that it shattered her perception of the world, leaving her trapped in a waking nightmare. She was eventually found by a prefect, collapsed on the floor of the library, her eyes wide and unseeing, her body trembling uncontrollably. She was muttering incoherently, her voice hoarse and strained, her face pale and streaked with tears. The incident sent shockwaves through the school. Elara's terrifying hallucination was distinctly different from any known magical malady or prank. It was not the result of a miscast spell or a mischievous house elf. It was something far more sinister, something that had the power to warp reality itself, to manipulate the very fabric of perception. It was an experience that went beyond typical magic. The professors were left with an understanding that this was not something simple. It was complex, powerful, and dangerous. The school was forced to acknowledge that the threat was real, that it was escalating, and that it was no longer just a series of isolated incidents. The calls for ministry intervention grew louder, more insistent, fueled by a desperate hope that someone, anyone, could provide a solution, could restore order to their shattered world. But time was of the essence. The darkness that had taken root within Hogwarts was growing stronger, feeding on their fear, their uncertainty, their division. It was clear that they could not afford to wait for outside help. They needed to act, and they needed to act fast, before the very heart of Hogwarts was consumed by the encroaching shadows. The situation was dire, and the time for waiting was over. They had to save themselves, and they had to do it quickly, before there were any more victims. The incident with Elara, the stark reality of the escalating threat, galvanized Arthur. He understood, with chilling clarity, that waiting for the Ministry of Magic was a luxury they could no longer afford. The realization that the safety of his fellow students, the very sanctity of Hogwarts, rested on finding a solution, and finding it quickly, ignited a fire within him, a fierce determination that burned away any lingering doubts or hesitations. He would have to be the one to find the answers they so desperately needed. He would be the one to protect Hogwarts. He decided to take matters into his own hands, to delve even deeper into the forbidden knowledge that he suspected held the key to understanding the strange occurrences. The Hogwarts Library, once a refuge, now felt like a battleground, a place where knowledge was both a weapon and a shield. He focused his research, seeking information on obscure magical practices, delving into forgotten branches of magic that had been deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable, too unstable for mainstream study. He spent countless hours in the restricted section, surrounded by towering shelves laden with ancient tomes bound in dragon hide and secured with heavy enchanted locks. The air here hummed with a potent, almost palpable energy, a tangible manifestation of the powerful, often volatile magic contained within the pages of these forbidden books. He had to be warded at all times to merely be in their presence. He focused on texts related to sensory magic, the manipulation of perception, and the subtle energies that underpinned the fabric of reality. He pored over cryptic diagrams, deciphered archaic languages, and traced the evolution of magical theory, searching for any hint, any clue that might shed light on the nature of the disturbances plaguing the castle. He barely slept, barely ate, fueled by a potent combination of adrenaline and a profound sense of responsibility. His research drew attention. Professor McGonagall, her stern gaze softened by a hint of concern, cautioned him about the dangers of delving into forbidden knowledge. Other professors, their faces etched with worry, questioned his methods, his motives, his sanity. They warned him that he was treading on dangerous ground, that some knowledge was best left buried, that he risked unleashing forces he couldn't possibly comprehend, let alone control. The whispers among the students grew louder, more insistent, fueled by fear and a growing distrust of anything outside the norm. Arthur, once a figure of curiosity, was now viewed with suspicion, even outright hostility. His late-night forays into the restricted section, his cryptic notes, his intense focus, all served to isolate him further, to paint him as an outsider, a potential threat. He was walking a tightrope, balancing between his desperate need for knowledge and the growing animosity of those around him, aware that one wrong step could send him plummeting into the abyss. Yet, he pressed on, driven by the conviction that he was on the right path, that the answers he sought were within his grasp, that he alone held the key to saving Hogwarts from the encroaching darkness. He knew the risks, but the alternative, doing nothing and allowing the darkness to consume them all, was simply unthinkable. He would do what he had to, no matter the cost. Driven by a potent mix of intellectual curiosity and a growing sense of urgency, Arthur decided to move beyond theoretical research and begin practical experimentation. He needed to test his theories, to try to replicate the strange phenomena he had been observing, to understand the underlying mechanisms of the disturbances that were plaguing Hogwarts. He began to conduct small, discrete experiments within the castle walls, choosing locations where the ambient magic felt particularly distorted or unstable. These were places where the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary seemed thin, where the fabric of reality felt frayed and worn. He was careful and precise in his experiments. He started by attempting to manipulate the ambient magical energy, using his wand to weave intricate patterns in the air, mimicking the fluctuations he had observed during the disturbances. He whispered forgotten incantations, his voice barely audible above the soft hum of the castle, his movements precise and deliberate, his brow furrowed in concentration. He used specialized instruments, crafted from a combination of Muggle technology and enchanted objects, to measure and analyze the results, carefully recording his observations in a worn, leather-bound journal. The instruments, a unique blend of science and magic, were a testament to his unconventional approach, his ability to bridge two seemingly disparate worlds. Some of his experiments yielded promising, albeit unsettling, results. In a deserted classroom on the third floor, a room where the air always felt heavy and oppressive, he managed to create a localized distortion in the ambient magical field. The air shimmered and warped, the shadows in the room deepened and seemed to swirl, and a faint, metallic scent, reminiscent of the disturbances, filled the air. He felt a thrill of discovery, a sense of having touched the very heart of the mystery, but it was quickly tempered by a sense of unease, a realization of the sheer power he was attempting to harness. He quickly ended the experiment, the subtle distortions fading, the strange energy dissipating, leaving behind only a lingering chill and the faint scent of ozone. In another experiment, conducted in a secluded corner of the library, he attempted to replicate the sensory distortions that had plagued Ilara. He focused his will, channeling his own magical energy, attempting to bend and shape the perceptions of a small, inanimate object, a simple quill placed on a nearby desk. For a fleeting moment, the quill seemed to flicker and distort, its outline blurring, its shape shifting, as if viewed through a heat haze. He felt a surge of triumph, followed by a wave of nausea, a physical manifestation of the strain of manipulating such volatile energies. He was playing with fire. These experiments, while small in scale, confirmed his suspicions. The disturbances were not random acts of chaos, but the result of a deliberate manipulation of magical energies, a subtle but powerful form of magic that operated on the fringes of perception. It was a magic that was both fascinating and terrifying, a power that could warp reality itself. He was beginning to understand how it worked. However, his activities did not go unnoticed. The strange energies he was manipulating, the subtle distortions he was creating, inadvertently fueled the rumors that he was somehow connected to the disturbances, that he was the source of the chaos, not the one trying to stop it. Students whispered that they had seen him lurking in the corridors late at night, his eyes gleaming with an unnatural light, his hands moving in strange, unsettling gestures. They said he was practicing dark magic, that he was consorting with malevolent entities, that he was to blame for everything that was happening. The more he learned, the more isolated he became. His pursuit of knowledge, once a source of pride, now became a burden, a secret that he had to guard from those who would misunderstand, those who would fear him, those who would seek to stop him. He was walking a dangerous path, caught between his desire to save Hogwarts and the growing animosity of the very people he was trying to protect. He was losing allies, and his enemies were multiplying. His attempts to help were only making things worse. The whispers and rumors surrounding Arthur, fueled by fear and misunderstanding, finally coalesced into open hostility. A faction within the student body, a group largely composed of older students, driven by a potent mix of anxiety and a deep-seated distrust of anything that deviated from the norm, openly accused Arthur of being responsible for the escalating disturbances. They saw his unconventional methods, his solitary research, his unique perspective, his Muggle background, as inherently suspicious, as evidence that he was not one of them, that he was an outsider, a threat. They pointed to his late-night experiments, the strange energies he was manipulating, the subtle distortions he was creating, as proof that he was the cause of the chaos that had gripped the school. They conveniently ignored the fact that the disturbances had started long before he began his experiments, that he was trying to understand the phenomena, not create them. Logic and reason were swept away by the tide of fear that was engulfing Hogwarts. Their accusations were vocal and public, delivered with a venomous intensity that shocked even those who harbored doubts about Arthur's involvement. They confronted him in the corridors, their faces contorted with anger and fear, their voices dripping with scorn. They interrupted his studies in the library, their whispers turning to jeers, their stares burning into him like hot coals. They turned his own research against him, twisting his words, misinterpreting his findings, using them as evidence to support their claims. They painted him as a dangerous individual, a rogue wizard who was dabbling in dark magic, who was deliberately destabilizing the castle, who was putting them all at risk. He had become a pariah. He faced direct opposition and ostracization, becoming a scapegoat for their fear, a convenient target for their anxieties. His attempts to defend himself, to explain his research, to share his findings, were met with derision and disbelief. They refused to listen, their minds closed by fear, their hearts hardened by suspicion. He was an easy target, an outsider who had dared to challenge the established norms, who had dared to seek answers where others feared to tread. He was different, and in their fear-stricken state, different meant dangerous. Different meant guilty. However, amidst the hostility and condemnation, a small group of individuals, including a bright and insightful Ravenclaw student named Lysander, began to see through the veil of fear and misinformation. Lysander, known for his sharp intellect, his meticulous research skills, and his unwavering belief in the power of knowledge, had been observing Arthur's work with a mixture of curiosity and cautious respect. He had seen the dedication, the meticulous attention to detail, the sheer intellectual rigor that Arthur brought to his research. He had also examined the evidence, the growing body of data that Arthur had collected, the subtle but undeniable patterns he had identified, and he had begun to realize that Arthur's theories, however unconventional, were not only plausible, but were supported by a growing body of evidence. Lysander, along with a handful of other students who valued logic and reason over fear and prejudice, started to cautiously believe in Arthur. They saw his isolation, his unwavering determination, his genuine desire to help, and they recognized the injustice of the accusations leveled against him. They began to offer their support, discreetly at first, then more openly, providing him with assistance in his research, offering him a safe haven from the hostility of their peers, defending him against the accusations, acting as a buffer between him and the growing animosity of the student body. They formed a small, tight-knit group, united by their belief in Arthur, their commitment to the truth, and their shared determination to find a solution to the crisis that had engulfed their school. They were his only allies now, and they were few, but they were fiercely loyal. He had a small light of hope in this dark time. The mounting pressure, the relentless accusations, and the growing isolation took their toll on Arthur. He was pushed to his breaking point, his determination wavering, his spirit flickering like a candle in a storm. He was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, drained by his relentless research, the constant vigilance, the unwavering hostility of his peers. He began to doubt himself, to question his own sanity, to wonder if his accusers were right, if he was somehow responsible for the chaos that had engulfed Hogwarts. He was so tired. Then came the sabotage. It was a deliberate, calculated act, designed not just to hinder his research, but to destroy it, to erase all traces of his work, to silence him once and for all. He returned to his makeshift lab, a secluded alcove in the library where he had been conducting his experiments, to find it in ruins. His meticulously organized notes were scattered across the floor, torn and defaced, rendered illegible. His delicate instruments, crafted with such care and precision, were smashed beyond repair, their intricate components reduced to a pile of useless debris. The specialized books, containing his annotations, his observations, his insights, were missing, likely destroyed or hidden where he would never find them. It wasn't just an accident, it was targeted. The act of sabotage triggered a dangerous magical backlash. The volatile energies that Arthur had been manipulating, now disrupted and uncontrolled, surged through the library, creating a localized storm of chaotic magic. Books flew off the shelves, their pages swirling through the air like angry spirits. The air crackled with static electricity, raising the hairs on the back of one's neck. The temperature fluctuated wildly, swinging from icy cold to sweltering heat in an instant. The very structure of the library seemed to groan under the strain, the stone walls vibrating with the force of the unleashed energy. It was a terrifying display of the power he had been attempting to understand, a stark reminder of the risks he had been taking. The saboteur had nearly killed many students with their actions. Arthur, caught in the midst of the magical maelstrom, was both terrified and strangely exhilarated. He had always known, on some level, that he was playing with fire, that he was treading on dangerous ground. But this was different. This was a direct confrontation, a clear indication that he was getting close to the truth, that his research was a threat to someone or something. It was also a wake-up call. This was too much for him to handle on his own. It was Professor Orion, a seemingly unremarkable but secretly powerful wizard who taught history of magic, who intervened. He had always been a quiet observer of Arthur's struggles, recognizing a kindred spirit in the young, determined student. With a series of deft movements, he contained the chaotic energy, calming the magical storm, restoring order to the library. He then took Arthur under his wing, offering him guidance, protection, and a safe haven from the growing hostility of the student body. Professor Orion had seen this all before, many years ago. He knew what was happening, and he knew what Arthur was trying to do. He was the ally that Arthur desperately needed. He was one of the only ones who could help him now. It was time for Arthur to truly learn about the magic he was trying to stop. Under Professor Orion's tutelage, Arthur delved deeper into the nature of veil magic, the subtle, often overlooked art of manipulating the boundaries between worlds, of influencing perceptions, of altering the very fabric of reality. He learned that the disturbances plaguing Hogwarts were not merely random acts of chaos, but a carefully orchestrated attempt to weaken the veil that separated the magical world from the mundane, to create a rift, a point of vulnerability, through which something dark and ancient could seep into their world. It was a terrifying prospect, the implications of which sent shivers down his spine. This was bigger than any one person, bigger than Hogwarts itself. Guided by his mentor, and with the help of his small but dedicated group of allies, including the ever-reliable Lysander, Arthur devised a risky plan to counteract the threat. It was a complex, multi-stage operation that required precise timing, intricate spellwork, and a deep understanding of the very forces they were attempting to control. It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to restore balance, to reinforce the veil, to push back the encroaching darkness. They would have to work together, in perfect harmony, or risk making things far worse. Arthur, having gained a deeper understanding of veil magic, presented his plan to his allies. He explained his theory, his voice trembling slightly, despite his efforts to remain calm, outlining the steps they needed to take, the risks involved, the potential consequences. He spoke of manipulating magical energies, of creating a counter-resonance, of weaving a protective barrier, of channeling their collective will to reinforce the veil. It was a complex, audacious plan, one that required them to trust in his knowledge, his instincts, his understanding of a magic that most wizards considered to be nothing more than a myth. The plan was presented in a tense, hushed meeting in a hidden chamber deep within the castle, a place where the ambient magic felt strong and stable, a place where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. His allies listened intently, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and determination, their eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight that illuminated the room. They questioned him, challenged him, probed for weaknesses in his logic, but ultimately they placed their faith in him, their trust forged in the crucible of shared adversity. They were a small band, facing a seemingly insurmountable threat, but they were united by a common purpose, a shared belief in their ability to make a difference. The plan was executed with a precision born of desperation and meticulous planning. Lysander, using his extensive knowledge of ancient runes, prepared a series of intricate diagrams, magical focal points that would help to channel and direct the energies they were manipulating. Professor Orion, drawing upon his decades of experience, guided them through the complex spellwork, his voice calm and steady, his movements precise and assured. Arthur, leveraging his unique understanding of veil magic, acted as the conductor, the linchpin of the operation, channeling the raw magical energy, weaving it into a cohesive whole, directing it towards the weakened points in the veil. He was drawing on a power he was only beginning to understand, guided by instinct and a deep-seated connection to the subtle currents of magic that flowed through the castle. The climax was not a loud, explosive confrontation, but a silent, intense battle of wills, a delicate dance of energies, a subtle manipulation of the very fabric of reality. It took place in the heart of the castle, in the very places where the disturbances had been most pronounced, where the veil was thinnest. They worked in unison, their movements synchronized, their voices blending in a low rhythmic chant, their wands tracing intricate patterns in the air. The air crackled with energy, The very stones of the castle seemed to vibrate with the intensity of their efforts. It was a draining, exhausting process, pushing them to their limits, testing their resolve, their courage, their faith in each other. But they did not falter. They held firm, their determination fueled by the knowledge that the fate of Hogwarts, perhaps even the fate of the wizarding world, rested on their shoulders. They poured all of their magic, all of their focus, all of their will into this final, desperate push to restore balance. It all came down to this moment, this one final push. The plan hinged on a coordinated effort, a symphony of magical skill orchestrated by Arthur. Lysander, his fingers stained with ink and his eyes gleaming with intellectual fire, had meticulously prepared a series of runic arrays, intricate diagrams etched onto the ancient stones of the castle in locations where the veil was weakest. These runes, drawn from forgotten tomes and imbued with a potent, almost primal energy, served as focal points, anchors that would help to channel and direct the raw magical power they were about to unleash. They were strategically placed, forming a protective web, a network of magical energy designed to reinforce the weakened veil. Professor Orion, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a focused intensity, guided them through the complex incantations, his voice a low, steady hum that resonated with the ancient stones of the castle. He corrected their pronunciation, adjusted their wand movements, ensured that each spell was performed with the utmost precision. He was a calming presence, a beacon of experience in the swirling vortex of chaotic energy, his deep understanding of magical theory grounding them, preventing them from being swept away by the forces they were attempting to control. He was their anchor, their guide, their protector. Arthur, positioned at the center of the runic array, acted as the conductor, the heart of the operation. He closed his eyes, drawing upon his innate connection to the subtle currents of magic, focusing his will, channeling the raw energy that flowed through the castle, directing it towards the runes, weaving it into a cohesive, powerful force. He could feel the energy coursing through his veins, a potent, almost overwhelming sensation, like holding a live wire, a power that could both create and destroy. He was a conduit, a vessel, a focal point for the collective will of his allies, his unique understanding of veil magic allowing him to manipulate the energies in a way that no one else could. He was pushing himself to his limits, both physically and mentally. As they chanted, the air within the castle grew thick with energy. The very stones seemed to vibrate in resonance with their efforts. The runes on the floor glowed with an eerie, ethereal light, their intricate patterns pulsing with power. The temperature fluctuated wildly, moments of intense heat followed by bone-chilling cold. Shadows danced in the corners of the room, taking on strange, unsettling shapes. The air crackled as if a storm were about to break. They were pushing back, fighting against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, the fabric of reality seemed to tear. A wave of intense pressure washed over them, a physical manifestation of the dark energy attempting to breach the veil. It was a terrifying sensation, like being caught in the undertow of a powerful wave, a force that threatened to overwhelm them, to drag them down into the abyss. They could hear a low, guttural growl echoing through the castle, a sound that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the earth, a sound that promised pain, chaos, and oblivion. It was the sound of the entity, the force that was trying to break through. Arthur, his body trembling with the strain, focused his will, channeling all of his energy, all of his determination into reinforcing the veil. He visualized the barrier, a shimmering, translucent wall, pushing back against the encroaching darkness, sealing the rift, restoring balance. He poured every ounce of his being into this effort, his mind a maelstrom of focused energy, his body a conduit for the raw power of magic. It was a battle of wills, a clash between light and darkness, order and chaos, and the fate of Hogwarts, perhaps even the fate of the wizarding world, hung in the balance. It all came down to this one final push, this one desperate attempt to hold the line, to protect their world from the horrors that lay beyond. They had to hold strong, just a little longer. The intense pressure, the terrifying growl, the feeling of the castle itself groaning under the strain, reached a crescendo, then abruptly ceased. The chaotic energy that had filled the air dissipated, like a storm that had suddenly broken, leaving behind a profound stillness, an eerie silence that was almost as unsettling as the cacophony that had preceded it. The glowing runes dimmed, their ethereal light fading, their power receding, leaving behind only faint traces of their intricate patterns etched on the stone floor. The temperature stabilized, the shadows retreated to their corners, the air cleared, the oppressive weight that had been pressing down on them lifted. They had done it. They had pushed back the darkness. Arthur, drained and trembling, slowly opened his eyes, his body slumping with exhaustion, his mind reeling from the intensity of the experience. He looked around, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his allies, their expressions a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and a lingering sense of disbelief. Lysander, his face pale, but his eyes shining with a newfound understanding, offered him a shaky smile. Professor Orion, his usually stoic demeanor softened by a hint of pride, placed a reassuring hand on Arthur's shoulder. They had succeeded. They had reinforced the veil, sealed the rift, pushed back the encroaching darkness. The immediate aftermath was a period of stunned silence, of quiet contemplation, of gradual realization of what they had accomplished. The disturbances that had plagued Hogwarts ceased. The strange occurrences, the unsettling phenomena, the sensory distortions, the pervasive sense of unease, all vanished, replaced by a sense of calm, of normalcy, of a balance restored. The castle, once a place of fear and uncertainty, felt safe again, its ancient stones radiating a familiar warmth, its atmosphere cleansed, its energy flowing smoothly once more. It felt like they could finally breathe again. The news of their success spread quickly through the castle, carried on the whispers of students, the relieved sighs of professors, the silent nods of the portraits lining the walls. The reaction was a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a lingering sense of bewilderment. Many found it hard to believe that the threat had been real, that the darkness had been so close, that they had been on the brink of something truly terrible. Others, particularly those who had been most vocal in their condemnation of Arthur, struggled to reconcile their previous beliefs with the undeniable truth of what he and his allies had accomplished. They had been wrong about him. There was a sense of collective relief, a shared feeling of having survived a great ordeal, of having stared into the abyss and emerged, battered but unbroken. The immediate threat had been neutralized, the source of the disturbances identified and contained, their effects reversed. Hogwarts was safe, for now. The darkness had been pushed back, but the memory of it lingered, a faint shadow in the corners of their minds, a reminder of the fragility of their world, of the constant vigilance required to protect it. They had won this battle, but the war, they knew, was far from over. The forces of darkness were always lurking, always waiting for an opportunity to strike. They had to remain vigilant. In the days and weeks that followed, Arthur's role within Hogwarts underwent a profound transformation. The initial suspicion, the animosity, the accusations that had once haunted him began to dissipate, replaced by a grudging respect, a tentative acceptance, a newfound appreciation for his unique skills and knowledge. The students who had once mocked him, who had labeled him a dark wizard, who had accused him of being the source of the disturbances, now looked at him with a mixture of awe and embarrassment. They had been so wrong about him, so blinded by their fear, that they had failed to see the truth. They had let their fear control them. The change was gradual, subtle, but undeniable. The whispers that had once followed him down the corridors were now filled with a different kind of speculation, a curiosity about his methods, his research, his unique understanding of veil magic. Students who had once avoided him now sought him out, eager to learn from him, to understand the magic he had wielded, to gain a new perspective on the very fabric of their world. He was no longer an outsider, a pariah, but a reluctant hero, a figure of fascination, a testament to the power of unconventional thinking. He had earned their respect, not through force, but through courage, through intellect, through a steadfast determination to protect the school they all called home. There were moments of reconciliation, tentative at first, then more genuine. Students who had been particularly vocal in their condemnation approached him, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and apology. They offered their thanks, their respect, their willingness to learn from him, to help him in any way they could. These interactions were often awkward, sometimes painful, but they were necessary, a crucial step in the healing process, in the rebuilding of trust, in the forging of a new understanding within the Hogwarts community. They had all made mistakes. It was time to move forward. Professor Orion, with the quiet support of Headmaster McGonagall, began to integrate Arthur's unconventional understanding of magic into the Hogwarts curriculum. Veil magic, once a forbidden subject, whispered about in hushed tones, was now openly discussed, studied, and even practiced, albeit under careful supervision. It was a significant shift, a recognition that different perspectives could be valuable, that even the most obscure branches of magic had something to offer. That knowledge, even dangerous knowledge, was better understood than feared. It was a testament to Arthur's perseverance, his unwavering belief in the importance of understanding the unknown, even when that understanding came at a great personal cost. Arthur, though still an individualist at heart, found himself more integrated into the Hogwarts community. He was no longer an outsider looking in, but a valued member of the school, his skills recognized, his knowledge sought after, his presence respected. He had found his place, not by conforming, but by embracing his unique perspective, by staying true to himself, by proving that different could be valuable, that different could be essential, that different could, in fact, save the day. He had made a difference, not just by stopping the disturbances, but by changing the way that magic itself was perceived within the walls of Hogwarts. He had made his mark. He had made it his home. The immediate threat to Hogwarts was resolved. The castle, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had returned to its familiar rhythm, its ancient stones resonating with the comforting hum of everyday magic. The students, having weathered the storm, returned to their studies, their laughter echoing through the corridors, their youthful energy filling the halls with a renewed sense of vitality. The professors, their faces etched with a quiet pride, resumed their teaching, their lessons imbued with a new depth of understanding, a subtle acknowledgement of the power of forgotten knowledge. Hogwarts was safe, the darkness pushed back, the balance restored. They had faced the abyss and emerged stronger, wiser, more united. The story concludes with a sense of hope, a quiet optimism that permeates the very air of the castle. There is a subtle shift in the school's perception of magic, a newfound appreciation for the unconventional, the unorthodox, the previously forbidden. Veil magic, once relegated to the dusty shelves of the restricted section, now held a place of cautious respect, its study integrated into the curriculum, its power acknowledged, its potential explored. It was a testament to Arthur's courage, his perseverance, his unwavering belief in the importance of understanding all facets of magic, even those that seemed dark or dangerous. Arthur, though still an individualist, still drawn to the unexplored corners of magical knowledge, was now more integrated into the Hogwarts community. He was no longer an outsider, a suspect, a target of fear and misunderstanding. His skills were valued, his knowledge sought after, his unique perspective respected. He had found his place, not by conforming, but by embracing his differences, by proving that unconventional thinking could be a strength, that a blend of Muggle pragmatism and magical understanding could offer a new way of seeing the world. He had earned his place at Hogwarts, not just as a student, but as a pioneer, a trailblazer, a young wizard who had dared to challenge the established norms and in doing so had saved the school he had come to call home. The ending subtly hints at future challenges, acknowledging that the wizarding world is rarely without conflict, that the forces of darkness are always lurking, waiting for an opportunity to emerge from the shadows. But Hogwarts was now better equipped to face them, fortified not just by its ancient stones and powerful enchantments, but by a newfound appreciation for the power of forgotten knowledge, by a willingness to embrace different perspectives, by a recognition that even the most unconventional magic could be a force for good. They had learned a valuable lesson, a lesson etched in the very fabric of their experience, that knowledge, understanding, and unity were their greatest weapons against the darkness, that open-mindedness and courage were the keys to a brighter future. The wizarding world was still a dangerous place, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They were stronger now, together.